The Six-Day War. It is the fourth shortest world war in the history. It is the most famous war that Israel has ever participated. But people don't know that it all started as a lie. How to understand this? We have to go back. Best simplified by the journalist Mehdi Hassan. 50 years ago, between June 5 and June 10, 1967, Israel invaded and occupied East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golden Heights. The Six-Day War, as will be later dubbed, saw Jewish David inflicted a humiliating defeat on the Arab Goliath, personified perhaps by Gamal Abdel Nasser's Egypt. The insistence of Israel's state harmed by a threat, the country's prime minister, Levi Eshkol, claimed 2 days after the war was over, but the hopes of the Arab leaders to annihilate Israel was dashed. Genocide, went the argument, had been prevented, another Holocaust of the Jews averted. There is, however, a problem with this argument. It's a complete fiction, a self-serving fantasy, constructed after the event to justify a war of aggression and conquest. Don't take my word for it. The thesis according to which the danger of genocide hung over us in June 1967, and according to which Israel was fighting for her physical survival, was nothing but a bluff, which was born and bred after the war, declared General Matithyahu Belet, a chief of logistical command during the war and one of the 12 members of Israel's general staff, in March 1972. A year earlier, Mordecai Pinto, a member of the wartime government and one of the 37 people to sign Israel's Declaration of Independence, made a similar admission. His whole story about the threat of extermination was totally contrived, then elaborated upon a posteriori to justify the annexation of New Arab territory, he said in April 1971. Even Israel's Prime Minister, Menachem Begin, a former terrorist and darling of the Israeli far-right concede, remember, he used to be a member of the Stern Gang, a fascist terrorist organization during the mandatory Palestine era. In a speech in August 1982 that in June 1967 we had a choice. The Egyptian army, concentrating in the Sinai approach, did not prove that Nasser was really about to attack us. We must be honest with ourselves. We decided to attack him. The reverberations of that attack are still being felt in the Middle East today. Few modern conflicts have had as deep and long-lasting impact as the Six-Day War. As the U.S. academic and activist Thomas Rayford has observed, it sounded the death knell of pan-Arab nationalism, at the rise of political Islam and more independent Palestinian nationalism, and Israel's emergence as a U.S. strategic asset, with the United States sending billions of dollars with strategic partnerships unquelled in world history. Above all else, the war, welcomed by the London Daily Telegraph in 1967 as the triumph of the civilized, forced another 300,000 Palestinians from their homes and ushered a brutal military occupation with a million odd Palestinians left behind. The conflict itself had lasted only 6 days, but the occupation that followed is now entering its sixth decade, the longest military occupation in the world. Apologists for Israel often deny there is an occupation and say the occupied territory are merely disputed and disingenuous claim entitled by Israel's own Supreme Court, which ruled in 2005. The West Bank is held by the State of Israel by bilateral occupation. What did Palestinians see in 50 years? 50 long years of occupation, of dispossession, of ethnic cleansing, of house demolition, and night curfews, of checkpoints, walls, and permits. 50 years of bombings and blockades, of air raids and night raids, of targeting civilians like human shields, of tortured Palestinian kids. 50 years of racial discrimination and ethnic prejudice, of a separate but unequal two-tier justice system for Palestinians and Israelis, of military courts and administrative detention. 50 years of humiliation and subjugation of pregnant Palestinian women giving birth at checkpoints, of Palestinian cancer patients denied access to radiation therapy, of Palestinian football players prevented from reaching their matches. 50 years of pointless negotiation and failed plans. Alon, Roger, Fad, Hess, Reagan, Madrid, Oslo, White River, Camp David, Daba, Red Sea, Annapolis. Did they deliver for the occupied Palestinians aside from the settlements and more settlements? Consider 92, a year before the Oslo peace process began, West Bank settlement covered 77 kilometers and housed 248,000 Israeli settlers. By 2016, those settlers covered 197 kilometers, and the number of settlers living in them had more than tripled to 763,000. These settlements have rendered the much-discussed two-state solution almost impossible. The occupied West Bank has been carved out into a series of Bantustanes, cut from each other and the wider world. The settlers are not going anywhere anytime soon. There are issues fact on the ground. Ignore them is to ignore perhaps the biggest obstacle to ending the occupation. It's like you and I negotiating over a piece of pizza. A Palestinian American lawyer and a former advisor to the PLO, Michael Tarasi, explained in 2004. How much of a pizza do I get? How much do you get? And while we're negotiating, you're eating it. It wasn't just 1967 where they launched on a lie. So too was the occupation that began after it. It was never suspected to be temporary, nor were the Palestinians ever supposed to get their land back. If Israel had planned to withdraw from the occupied territory, as some of its supporters suggest, then why was the first settlement in the West Bank, Kfar Etzion, established less than 4 months after the Six-Day War, in defiance of the top-secret advice by the Israeli Foreign Minister's legal advice? The civilian settlement in the territory would contradict the explicit provision of the Fourth Geneva Convention. Why has it rewarded the residency rights hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank over the past 50 years? Why has the Jewish state spent the past 5 decades exploring the charade of peace process to gather up more Palestinian land and build more illegal settlements? The truth is that Jewish states from the very beginning used negotiation as a small screen to advance its colonial project. To borrow a line from imprisoned Palestinian militant and activist Marwan Barghouti, 50 years on, it is time for the both Palestinian leadership and the international community to stop pretending otherwise. The legendary Israel general and defense minister Moshe Dayan, who was one of the architects of the Israeli victory in 1967, was adamant that the country should hold on to the territories he has seized, best summed up by the cynical attitude of Israeli government, both right and left, covered the past 5 decades. The only peace negotiation, pronounced Dayan, asked about the possibility of a peace deal with Palestinians in November 1970, and I quote, "Are those where we settle the land and we build, and we settle from the time do we go to war?" And remember, even from the very beginning, este, there was almost a civil war that happened between the two pre-IDF military organizations, one led by the liberal socialist labor zionist group and the other led by the revisionist fascists. It almost started because of this. And the fascists, in the end of the day, faction won over and are basically in charge of the government, even if under the presidency of the labor zionists. And this is what is happening right now. They want to start a new world war against Iran, even though advised by everyone from all sides, this is a bad idea. This is gonna be the death of everybody.